close to 200 years of professional experience.
What's his name? Oh, he's a fugitive case, I think. What number is Bailey?
Kids working this hard. Yeah, Grace, full-time legal assistant, which is good. He's not doing so much. It's working for a lot, but good, please. Yeah, yeah.
Does he want to be a lawyer?
He doesn't want to go to law school. He loves He does court briefs, he does jury questions. He's getting a lot of
County District Court, Seattle Division. This is the jail calendar. July 15th, 2021. I have some unconditional releases. Fantastic. I have some unconditional releases. Go through these real quick. Out of custodies, I have Robert Bailey, case number 221007879.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Puget Sound with Northwest Defenders. If we could perhaps address the Richard Sherman matter at the top of the calendar. Our gallery here, and I'm sure your gallery over there, is filled to the brim. And we would very much like to get all these people out of here as soon as possible.
I understand that, counsel, but I got some out of custody releases I want to get to first.
That's right.
Robert Bailey, 221007879. Mr. Olson states not moving forward on this charge at this time.
That's correct.
I'm signing an unconditional release along with the recall no contact order.
And Mr. Bailey is here in the courtroom. If you could just stick around for a few minutes, one of the officers will hand you that paperwork, okay? And then once you get that paperwork, you're free to go.
Patrick Flack, number 25 on the calendar, case number 221007881. Mr. Olson states not moving forward on this burglary charge at this time.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Sign unconditional release for Mr. Flack. Luke Dickerson, number 24 on the calendar, case number 221007872. Mr. Olson states not moving forward on this charge at this time.
That's correct, Your Honor.
Sign unconditional release for him. Second appearances in custody, Fernando Guillermo, case number 221007874, number 28 on the calendar. Mr. Olson states not moving forward on this matter.
That's correct.
Michael Marcheselli, 221007888, number 29 on the calendar, states not moving forward at this time, Mr. Olson.
That's correct.
Antonio O'Neill, number 31 on the calendar, case number 221007880, state not moving forward, Mr. Olson.
That's correct.
Turning my attention now to the first appearances. Case number 221007927, in Mujad Youssef, number 12 on today's calendar, state not moving forward with this charge.
That's correct.
Kiana McLeod, number 14, case number 221007956, Mr. Olson, state not moving forward.
That's correct.
And Francine Melfort, number 16 on the calendar, case number 221007930, state not moving forward at this time, Mr. Olson.
That's correct.
Sign unconditional releases on all those matters. Be patient. My clerk is amazing, but she is not fast enough to send this information instantaneously. So give her a moment. Mr. Offenbecker.
Good afternoon,
Does the defense have any motions at this time?
Your Honor, we're asking the court to waive Mr. Sherman's presence in court. I have filed and submitted to the court a waiver of his presence. We filed it on ACR and also sent it to the KCBC email address. Mr. Sherman understands his right to be present today in court. I discussed that with him. He understands that the court may be making decisions related to his matter, including probable cause determinations and conditions of release. He agrees to waive his presence at today's hearing and appear through me, his attorney.
This is case number 221007933. Does the state have any objection to allowing Mr. Sherman to waive his appearance for today's hearing?
No, Your Honor.
I will grant the defense motion to allow the defendant to appear through counsel, and I find that his waiver is knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily given. Mr. Olson.
Your Honor, the state is asking the court to find probable cause in this case for one count of criminal trespass in the second degree with a domestic violence designation, malicious mischief in the third degree with a domestic violence designation, resisting arrest, and driving while under the influence.
And DUI?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Offenbecker, any argument to the sufficiency of evidence? And first, were you able to get a certificate of probable cause that was provided to me really late by the state? Have you been able to review that, Mr. Offenbecker?
I have, Your Honor. And as to the charges that the state has enumerated today, which include all misdemeanor or gross misdemeanor offenses, I have no comments on probable cause.
Give me a moment to re-review this. Now, hang on for 1 second.
The attorney mic is low. I don't know if you can. The attorney mic might be muted.
Mr. Olson, does the state have any information from Washington State Patrol in relationship to the DUI matter?
I'm sorry, Your Honor, in relation to the DUI?
Yes.
In addition to the, I believe, the 12-page supplemental that the state provided.
I have a 12-page, I don't have a 12-page. It starts at page 16, and it says to page 30. But I guess pages 16, 17, 18, 19,
Your Honor,
and 20.
I did provide both the court and Mr. Offenbecker a Washington State Patrol DUI investigation, report of a DUI investigation. I do have a hard copy here I can pass forward.
Yes, please.
I would like to review that.
Thanks, please. Reviewing the state's Washington State Patrol Trooper Arata's information. During the state's reports and information, I find probable cause for one charge of criminal trespass in the second degree for domestic violence, one charge of malicious mischief in the third degree for domestic violence, one charge of resisting arrest, and one charge of DUI. Conditions of release, Mr. Olson.
Your Honor, the state is asking the court to impose bail in the amount of $10,000 in this case to enter a domestic violence no contact order protecting Raymond Moss, to enter an order to surrender any firearms. We would ask that Mr. Sherman be ordered not to possess any weapons, not to consume any alcohol or non-prescribed drugs. And the basis for the state's bail request are the underlying facts of this case. Based on those facts, the state does have concerns for community safety, Mr. Sherman's family safety, and Mr. Sherman's safety himself. The facts involved in this case allege that law enforcement were dispatched to Mr. Sherman's home in response to suicidal threats by Mr. Sherman. The information indicated that he had been drinking and he was taking antidepressants. Subsequent to that report, the Washington State Patrol investigation demonstrates that he did subsequently get in his car and drive away from his home while under the influence. He drove that car into a construction zone. Construction workers present at that location did report that to law enforcement that they believed an individual was operating a vehicle while under the influence, based on their contact with him. The reports further indicate that while Mr. Sherman was in contact with law enforcement, he not only made those suicidal threats, but also made statements about taking a firearm from an officer. Mr. Sherman proceeded to Mr. Raymond Moss's house, his father-in-law, where he repeatedly tried to forcibly enter the front door of that residence. Mr. Moss eventually was placed in enough fear where he not only sprayed Mr. Sherman with bear mace, but retrieved his own firearm in concerns for his own safety. When law enforcement arrived at that location, Mr. Sherman was initially compliant, but however, when notified that he would be placed under arrest, began to resist the officers by stiffening and flexing in his muscles. This required law enforcement to forcibly place him under arrest and place him in handcuffs. The suicidal threats, combined with the threats to take an officer's firearm, combined with the fact that there is currently an extreme risk protection order that was filed this year. So a court has previously found that Mr. Sherman, or a previous court has had significant enough concerns to enter that order and prohibit him from possessing any firearms. I don't have a lot of information about that case, as the court that entered that order did seal that case, but the existence of that order combined with the facts of this case do demonstrate that defendant's actions do pose a risk to himself, his family, and the community at large. Suicidal ideation is something to take very seriously in general, but especially in a domestic violence context, as again, it places not only the individual making those suicidal ideation threats in a risk of harm, but also the individuals around him. So based on all of that information, Your Honor, including the driving while under the influence in a construction zone, the state believes that $10,000 is more than appropriate in this case and would ask the court to impose it.
Thank you, Counsel. Mr. Offenbecker.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have no objection to the requested no contact order with Raymond Moss. As I understand it, that's the identified protected party that the state's requesting a no contact order for. We have no objection to the firearms or weapons conditions that the state's asked for. We have no objection to a standard condition ordering that Mr. Sherman not consume alcohol or non-prescribed drugs. We are asking this court to release him on his personal recognizance. And there is no reason to treat Mr. Sherman any differently than any other individual who comes before the court for the first criminal contact with the justice system on gross misdemeanor and misdemeanor charges. Of course, Mr. Sherman has no criminal history of any kind. He's an enduring part of our greater Seattle community, and part of the fabric of our community here around Washington, the social fabric. He is neither a flight risk nor a credible threat to commit a violent crime, nor a credible threat to interfere with the administration of justice or intimidate witnesses. He's one of the most beloved sports figures of our area. He's lived here since 2011 when he was drafted by the Seattle Seahawks. He's owned a home in Maple Valley since 2014. His wife, Ashley Moss, was born and raised here. Their 2 children go to school here. Even though he has played for the San Francisco 49ers for the past few seasons, he has lived here in King County. This is his home, and he is not going anywhere. His contributions to the community are innumerable. In 2013, he founded the blanket coverage Richard Sherman Family Foundation, which provides low-income communities with school supplies and clothing so that they can achieve their goals. He has sponsored charity softball events in Seattle, and lately he has taken to random acts of kindness in our community, renting a U-Haul and driving to Tacoma to distribute backpacks to folks in need. Richard Sherman is among the best in our community. We are proud to have him here, and he is a good person with a good soul. He is taking these allegations very seriously. Of course, this is his first contact with the criminal justice system, and it's a watershed moment for him. He's been arrested. He spent the past 2 days in jail. He's been separated from his family. And for someone like Mr. Sherman, who's never been in trouble with the law before, who's a free agent, his professional future hangs in the balance, Mr. Sherman is someone who this court can depend on to follow the rules. I will note in the reports regarding the DUI investigation, Officer Solberg and Trooper Arata both took care to note in the reports that once he was in custody, Mr. Sherman became jovial. He became calm. He started to joke with the officers and even commended one of them on their takedown of him. This is someone who presently appreciates the gravity of the circumstances and can follow the court's rule. And so the question for the court at this point is, under these circumstances, having been arrested, having sat in jail for 2 days, having been subjected to intense media scrutiny, the question for the court is, what conditions can reasonably assure his appearance in court, the safety of the community, and the non-interference with the administration of justice? This is his first time before the court, Your Honor, and a release on personal recognizance with other standard conditions is appropriate. Mr. Sherman can and will follow this court's orders to come back to court, to not drink alcohol, to not have contact with Mr. Moss. This court can depend on him to follow these standard conditions.
Mr. Offenbach, are there any members of his family that are present that wish to be heard?
Your Honor, I believe his wife, Ashley Sherman, is in court and would like to address the court.
Ma'am?
In light of the state's decision not to seek a no-contact order with Ms. Sherman, she would not like to address the court at this time.
I take no offense. Thank you for being here. Just wanted to give her an opportunity. I'm going to pose the following conditions. Mr. Sherman is not to have any criminal law violations. He is to appear for all court dates. He is to update his address if he moves within 24 business hours. He is not to consume any alcohol or non-prescribed drugs. He is not to drive a motor vehicle without a license and or insurance. He is not to refuse a breath test or a blood test if reasonably requested by a law enforcement officer. He is not to be in control of a motor vehicle within 2 hours of consuming alcohol and having a BAC of 0.08 or higher, or a THC of 5 nanograms or higher. I am going to issue a no firearms order, preventing him from having any firearms. If he has any firearms, he's going to have to turn those in. If he doesn't, there's a declaration of non-surrender that you can go over with him, Mr. Offenbach, and I will respect the fact that if you guys want to exercise your Fifth Amendment right that will take into place. I'm going to take that into consideration. I am going to issue a no contact order with Raymond David Moss. Please let Mr. Sherman know that he needs to sign this, and that this is my order, sir. It's not his, and it's not Mr. Moss's order. And I'm going to prevent Mr. Sherman from having any contact directly, indirectly, in person, through other persons, by mail, by phone, by electronic means, especially social media, or any kind of third-party contact. He is not to have any contact with Mr. Moss whatsoever. If Mr. Sherman shows up to a place where Mr. Moss is present, Mr. Sherman will need to leave. If Mr. Sherman is at a place where Mr. Moss shows up, Mr. Sherman is to leave. Please make sure he signs that document and he understands it. The big question is, should I let him go? Should I hold him on bail? Court rules indicate that I have to, on a first offense, for anything, the presumption is release with conditions. The state is asking for bail of $10,000. I see Mr. Sherman as a pillar in this community. He's a business owner. He's a husband. He's a father. I'm going to release Mr. Sherman on his own promise to return to court. Next court date, boss.
Next court date is going to be tomorrow, the 16th at 8:30 a.m. in courtroom 1.
And, Your Honor, to clarify, given that the state is only requesting probable cause for misdemeanors and gross misdemeanors, we would ask that it be put on the district court second appearance calendar.
Okay. So tomorrow, July 16th at
8:30 a.m. in courtroom 1.
8:30 a.m. in courtroom 1. Okay. We set out to do it on Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Mr. Offenbach, because this matter was filed originally as a felony, it has to remain on the felony calendar until tomorrow. We'll set it for July 16th, tomorrow in courtroom 1 at 2 p.m. Any questions?
Yeah.